All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our Trucking Matters webinar series, which is sponsored by Reliance Partners. I am your host, Tom Albrecht, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Reliance. And we continue what is ultimately going to be a nine-part series on safety matters. So, sort of safety matters under the Trucking Matters umbrella, led by our safety impact team. And today is episode 4, where we are going through all 7 of the CSA Basics. But starting in January and then at the end of the series in May, we will have 2 episodes focused on nothing but case studies and how Mark and Daniel have helped clients navigate a series of challenges around the various CSA scores. In fact, I want to welcome back Mark Barlar and Daniel Vega. Guys, welcome aboard.
Hi, Tom.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Well, we do this every time, and we do this because sometimes we have some new folks on a webinar. But I'd like to ask each of the guys to just take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourselves, your background, and then what you also do at Reliance Partners. Mark, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Mark Barlar. I'm a former Wisconsin State Patrol Master Inspector with over 22 and a half years of doing DOT roadside inspections on the I-94 north-south corridor between Milwaukee and Chicago. About 20,000 trucks bypass that location every day. During that time, I did about 10,000 roadside inspections. I was an instructor for FMCSA for the Part A program, which is your driver's hours of service, CDLs, and medical qualifications, the hazardous material inspection program, and the cargo tank inspection program. Since 2020, I've been working with Reliance and our clients and helping to improve motor carrier safety scores.
That's
Hi,
great. Daniel?
hi guys. My name is Daniel Vega. Been in the trucking industry for about 13 years. Started off as a state trooper in Arizona, um, down in the I-8, I-10 area. I was a commercial enforcement inspector. Did that for about 10 years. Did a couple thousand inspections. Went through the Part A, Part B, motor coach hazmat, and then transitioned to the insurance industry about 2 years ago, and now helping our clients with compliance and safety and submitting data queues.
Yeah, so Mark, you're in Wisconsin still, and Daniel's out west in Arizona. So we're very fortunate to have both of you guys um, as a part of the Reliance team. You see their contact information. We will also show that again at the end of the of today's webinar. Mark, why don't you take us to the next slide? Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping here. So this is a 9-part series, and we do have some good news. We now have dates for February and March. So February will be February 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and that topic, of course, you see it there, controlled substances and alcohol. And March will be March 19th, also at 3 p.m. Eastern on driver fitness. I'm really looking forward to today's broadcast on crash indicators, but January 15th is going to be really good as well because we're going to just delve into, case studies where these guys have worked with fleets, their problems, challenges, and it may not just be about the CSA basics, but other issues that come up. So we welcome you to be thinking ahead to questions, issues you may be having in your fleets. As always, we will be posting the sign up link through LinkedIn and all the socials for the January episode. And if you missed something from the past, we do have a podcast, and it's under the Trucking Matters label. It's on all podcast forums. And as we've been doing each of these sessions, we do have to read a disclaimer. This presentation and webinar are designed for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as legal advice. The opinions and views expressed herein are not necessarily those of Reliance Partners and belong solely to the individual contributors. Always love a world of disclaimers. So let's go to the next slide. We've had this be a part of the webinar series thus far. It's a little bit of an update on ELP. And of course, there's so much going on in Washington between DOT Secretary Duffy and the new FMCSA administrator, Derek Bars, who, by the way, he's the first administrator who's not an interim appointment. First time we've actually had someone approved by Congress for a full-time role since 2019. But what you see on this chart, the lower numbers that are in red are the actual out-of-service violations at the national level per month. And if we just look at July through October, that's a total of 8,208 out of service drivers who were not proficient in the English language. And then when we look at the blue line, which is the actual violations, that totals 27,210 since July. Overall, about 30.2% of the drivers who've been written up for a violation have been placed out of service. And for those that really know the regulation well, technically they're supposed to be one and the same thing, according to CVSA back on May 1st. But there are some allowances made for a couple of key counties in Texas and in Southern California. And then, frankly, there are a few states that will cite it as a violation but not put the driver out of service. Obviously, there's a lot more going on than this, but we've had this be a part of every episode. And, just like to give that update. We are expecting the November number any day now. So, Mark?
All right, we're going to start off the main portion of our presentation here. It all starts out with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. They made the Compliance, Safety, and Accountability program, and then they have the safety measurement system where they have all 7 of their basics.
So today we're going to discuss the crash basic. So what is a crash basic? So it's a historical pattern of crash involvement, including frequency and severity. The basic is based on information from state reported crashes that meet reportable crash standards. This basic uses crash history that is not specifically a behavior, but instead the consequence of a behavior or a set of behaviors. So basically, crash is only accidents that are DOT reportables that are going to affect your crash basic. That's all you're going to see in that basic.
And to go along with that, Daniel, this is the only basic in the SMS system that doesn't rely at all on inspection reports. The other 6 basics, you have to have a DOT inspection for it to affect your score, whereas the crash basic has nothing to do with inspections. It has everything to do with reportable crashes. Now, how do we know what a reportable crash is, right? Well, we got to look at the definitions, and these are outlined in 49 CFR 390.5T. It's actually the first definition is an accident. And it means, number one, except as provided in paragraph 2 of this definition, an occurrence involving commercial motor vehicle operating on a highway in interstate or intrastate commerce, which results in
A fatality, bodily injury to a person who, as a result of the injury, immediately receives medical treatment away from the scene of an accident. One or more motor vehicles incurring disabling damage as a result of the accident, requiring the motor vehicle to be transported away from the scene by a tow truck or other motor vehicle. And this is important because where it says immediately receives medical treatment away from the scene. So if an ambulance shows up and they're complaining of pain, but they don't get transported, it doesn't meet the definition. Or another example could be for a tow truck arrives on scene. Say you have a flat tire, you go into the median, you're stuck there. You call a tow truck, they pull you out. Some officers might write a report and document that a tow was called. So it has to meet these definitions for them to actually be part of your score on the crash basic.
So what if the flat tire is repaired right there on the spot?
It shouldn't be marked as a DOT reportable. It shouldn't be a collision shouldn't be taken, but there's some officers, and I've seen it firsthand, that will write a crash report when it's not even a crash. So
So what happens if the truck is fine, but let's say, and it's maybe not a major incident, but a headlight, a headlight on a passenger car was knocked out. How's that going to be categorized by the officer?
Well, you have to ask each individual officer. I could only speak for Arizona. I mean, if the damage is not over 1,000, they're not even writing a report. Wisconsin, what is it in Wisconsin, Mark?
What do the cheeseheads do, Mark?
It's $1,000 for normal crashes. I believe it's $500 if it is government property, right? For those dollar amounts. And if it doesn't get listed as such, then a crash report doesn't get written. The important thing here is, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about it, including the tire disablement. Um, I was going somewhere with it. Now I kind of lost out of my head. Every crash, officers who write these crashes, they're not DOT officers for the most part. Most officers don't have DOT training, but any officer can write it. We're going to cover that a little bit here in a few more slides. So, are there any exceptions to this in the definition? Absolutely. There's usually exceptions to everything. It does not include an occurrence involving only the boarding and alighting from a stationary motor vehicle. And what that means is that somebody jump off the truck and hurt themselves or jump onto a stationary truck and hurt themselves. I saw a crash report written about a year ago that I reviewed, and they wrote it up as an injury crash after the person had crashed his vehicle, was getting out of the vehicle because it had turned on its side, and then has hurt his leg when he jumped off.
Hmm.
So the point value for disabling damage is different than an injury. And we were able to successfully data queue that one, stating that it was only disabling damage because of this exception. So it's always good to look through the definitions to know what exceptions there may be. And then number two, an occurrence involving only the loading or unloading of cargo. So if somebody gets a crush injury because a pallet jack went up on their foot, which happened to me a long time ago in another job at a grocery store, that wouldn't be an injury. It wouldn't be an accident when it comes to FMCSA.
That's interesting you talk about that. I was talking to the CEO of a trucking company on Tuesday, and he said that at a conference he was at a couple weeks ago, there was video of some of these cargo thieves. And up in Canada, they figured out a way where there's a vehicle that comes alongside the truck. There's another vehicle that is behind it, and then another vehicle cuts in front of the truck, and thieves are jumping out of the rear vehicle onto the trailer and breaking the seal. He said it was like watching a circus act. It's unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah, that is unbelievable.
Sidebar story of the day.
What is disabling damage? Disabling damage means damage which precludes the departure of a motor vehicle from the scene of an accident in its usual manner in daylight after simple repairs. So inclusions, damage to a motor vehicle that could have been driven but would have been further damaged if so driven. I think that's a good point to talk about because I mean if your vehicle is unsafe, I think the officer is going to determine that because they don't want to put more people at risk as well. But I mean, if you're able to make like maybe make or fix something that's not going to prevent you from continuing to move, then that shouldn't be included under disabling damage.
A good example that comes to mind for me is when you look at bumpers on cars these days, not like back in the 80s, the what you see on the vehicle are bumper covers. They're big pieces of plastic that actually cover the actual bumper of the vehicle. And they're just pieces of plastic. If you can rip that off with your hands, it is not disabling damage. So, and that's without using any tools. So it's just an example, and I've used that to successfully data queue crashes in the past to have them removed as it's not a reportable FMCSA crash. May be reportable for the state, but not for FMCSA. So, are there any exemptions to disabling damage? And this is we're going to talk about tires. One, damage which can be remedied temporarily at the scene of the accident without special tools or parts. That's one. Tire disablement without other damage, even if no spare tire is available. So back when Tom was asking about what if we got a flat tire and they changed it on the scene? Well, whether they changed it on the scene or towed it away to the tow lot and changed it there, that is still not considered disabling damage. And we've been able to successfully remove these crashes from motor carriers profiles using the data queue process. Headlight or taillight damage, those are exclusions, as well as damage to turn signals, horn, or windshield wipers, which makes them inoperative.
So,
So
Mark, oh, go ahead. I was going to say these are exclusions, but are there exclusions to the exclusions? In other words, what if the headlights out and it's, midnight, or there's a torrential rainstorm and the windshield's out, or
yep,
windshield wiper, excuse me.
that is excellent questions. It is still not considered disabling damage due to the fact that um, the first part of disabling damage definition, this is also listed in the regulations, means damage which precludes departure of a vehicle from the scene of an accident in its usual manner in daylight after simple repairs. So in daylight. Now, if a windshield is gone, that's pretty much going to be disabling damage at that point because, you gotta have it. Um, Otherwise, you got to have special equipment to drive the vehicle away. Where you start running into some of these disabling damages that are not do not meet the exemptions or doesn't meet the definition of disabling damage is a couple of things. One, let's say you're driving a rental car. Rental companies don't like to have their cars driven after it's been in a crash, no matter what type of damage it's been in. And they will actually call and say, hey, we want a tow to get it taken care of. Just because they asked for a tow and just because it is towed doesn't mean it was disabling damage. Other things that we have to remember as well is the definitions that we're talking about, these are not trained items for the most part for all normal police officers. These are FMCSA regulations. Normal officers don't get trained on FMCSA regulations. They get trained on state laws. And state law does not have to mirror this law when it comes to what qualifies as a crash. And so it comes down to a lot of times what that officer thinks is disabling damage. So you'll get tire disablement and they'll call that disabling damage. So
Is
we
that
need
why
to be
sometimes
aware.
local law enforcement doesn't know the definition of an FMCSA flat tire?
That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Oh, by the way,
So,
as we transition to the next slide, I forgot to mention to the audience, we will be taking questions and answers later on. You can submit those in the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to do that at any time during today's webinar. Take it away.
so any crash basic, any officer in the U.S. that can write a crash report that will affect the basic, no additional training is needed. Along a little bit along the lines of what Mark said. Say you just graduated from the academy and you hit the road. They have Most of them have no clue what these definitions mean. So if their first accident is involving a commercial truck and doesn't meet the definition, he may still write a report and it might affect you. So just make sure that when you are getting those reports, you're reviewing them and make sure it meets the definition of an accident.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think what I'm hearing is this particular basic might lend itself, depending on the circumstances, to a few more data queue challenges than some of the other basics because of things like what you just said.
Yes, and not only that, but we're going to kind of discuss it in the slides that are coming up. There's more examples that we could challenge these accidents to get them off your score.
And the reason why they are different is the crashes are not inspection reports. Inspection reports are violations of the law. Crashes are not violations of law. They're just a report that an officer fills out and then they submit it to the state, and then the feds They take certain information from that and they bring it into the SMS system if a couple of boxes are checked on that crash form. And for those motor carriers that are on, when you look at a crash report from each different state, they're all different. Now,
And
there's no state that's the same as another state.
Mm,
to
good
add
point.
to that as well, I mean, city police officers, sheriffs, they write these state reports and they have no idea what to do when a commercial vehicle crashes. They usually call in a DOT inspector from an agency if they're nearby to help them out, but everybody that's a certified police officer could potentially write a police crash report.
Yes. And, from the picture that's on the screen, obviously disabling damage here. Plus, there's injuries, and you see the blue tarp. This was also a fatality, so it met everyone. All right, so the crash severity weights are as follows. This is how the calculations are made. Disabling damage is 1 point when it comes to making the calculation. An injury is 2 points, and a fatality is 2 points. If the crash involves a release of hazardous materials, then it's the point severity for the three different categories plus one if there's an identifiable release of hazardous materials.
So all on-road safety events are assigned a time weight, which decreases with time. So 0 to 6 months severity weight is multiplied by three. 6 to 12 months severity weighted multiplied by two, and then 12 to 24. And it's basically just if we're talking about a tow weight, it's 1 point. From 12 to 24, it's going to be 1 point. And then after 2 years, that score doesn't affect your crash basic. So the first 6 months is where it's going to affect you the most, especially if it's an injury or fatal accident.
Yeah, I still don't understand why they fatals are 2 points and they don't have that as a higher um,
But
amount.
one of those could literally bring you from not having an alert to being in alert if it's a fatal or injury.
Definitely. All right. So the unsafe driving intervention thresholds for the crash indicator, if you're a passenger carrier vehicle, or carrier, sorry, it's the threshold is at 50%. If you're identify as a hazmat carrier, no matter if you're hauling hazmat for that one or not, if you identify as one, then the threshold is going to be 60%, and everybody else, it sits at 65%.
So how do we calculate this? It's basically total points for qualifying crashes divided by the average power units times utilization factor. The power units and utilization factor information is obtained from the MCS 150. It's basically an average of the power units plus the average miles that unit operates, and Mark's gonna kind of talk about that in the example that we have next slide.
Yeah. So it's very important when it comes to understanding how this um, basic is calculated. It's very, very important for you to update your MCS 150 if you're a rapidly growing carrier. If you're increasing in power units, you want to update your MCS 150 to reflect that, as well as the mileage that you have over the last year. This is how they come with that bottom number of average power units and the utilization factor for those power units. So when you when your fleet rapidly increases, and we're still say like to 100 trucks, and we still show that on our MCS 150 that we have 10 trucks, you have 100 vehicles out on the road with the ability to be involved in a crash, heaven forbid. Whereas FMCSA thinks you only have 10. And you might have three crashes in a month with the 100 vehicle fleet. Hopefully not. Uh, and if they think you only have 10 trucks, that has a huge effect on how your score is scored for the basic measure. So
So you're not only saying keep it accurate, you can update it more frequently than the 2 year requirement, correct?
that is absolutely correct. And you should, because these rapidly growing motor carriers, you will jump into the unsafe because the utilization factor and the average power units, the other basic that those numbers affect is unsafe driving. So unsafe driving and crashes, it'll have a huge effect on that measure, which is put you in that percentage of the group that you're in the basic. So yeah, you increase if you're growing, you update that MCS 150 um, early and often.
Well, and I know, Mark, some of the audience maybe has been with a motor carrier that's had to shrink. If the shrinkage is dramatic, should they update it a little bit more? Let's say they had 45 trucks, and because of the trucking recession, they're down to 20. I mean, what would be the most important variable to think about in that scenario?
Every 2 years.
by law.
When
But
you go down in the
textbook.
average trucks and utilization factor, if it gets less, then it will have a negative effect on your basic measure, right? Just know that when you do update the MCS 150, put down your accurate numbers, because it is a crime to falsify official records.
Well, and I think later we'll probably touch a little bit about driver behavior at the scene of an accident, different things that we talked about in one of the earlier webinars. But right now, we're certainly laying out just a lot of the basics around the crash indicators.
Yeah. So let's move on to the measure calculation. Let's say this company has three crashes over the past 24 months, one disabling crash 14 months ago, an injury crash 8 months ago, and one disabling damage crash 2 months ago. Average power units is three. And where they get the average power units is from the MCS 150 from 18 months ago, 6 months ago, and this current month. They add them up and divide by three. So this company probably didn't update their average power units because they got into three crashes in 2 years. And the total mileage in the past year is 150,000 miles, giving a utilization factor of one. Um, so when we add up the disabling damage 14 months ago, it's going to be 1 point. When you have an injury 8 months ago, we got to multiply it by two. So two times two is four. And disabling damage 2 months ago, it's one times three. So that's three. A total of eight. Utilization factor times the average power units. That's going to be three. Eight divided by three, your measure is 2.66. Now, what's important is where that measure falls in the group of motor carriers with similar amounts of crashes.
So the motor carrier measures placed in a safety event group based upon the number of crashes. The safety group lists every motor carrier and their measure from all crashes across the U.S. with 2 to 3 crashes. Past 2 years puts a motor carrier in group one. Where your measure score is listed in the group is how your percentage is calculated. So you're going to be compared to companies that have the same events of accidents. So if your company has 8 accidents, you're going to be in combination three, and you're going to be compared to that same group that has 7 to 16 events.
Yeah. And we're just putting this for combination vehicles. There's different groupings when it comes to motor carriers that operate straight trucks. So that one's a little bit different. What we're just trying to get across here is where you're at within that group with your measure. That's your percentage. And if you hit the percentage thresholds, that's when you are in the alert. So it is possible to successfully data queue crashes and accidents that are affecting your CSA score. First, you look at is it an FMCSA reportable crash or accident? And the only way that you can do that is you have to read the crash report. So if it is listed as a fatality, we got to make sure that it's a fatality. Had a client that had a fatal crash show up on their record when it was a fender bender in a parking lot. They contacted the agency that wrote the crash report, and the officer said he made a mistake, checked the wrong box. It's literally checking the wrong box that put a fatality on their record. They changed it. They got a copy of the crash report. They did the data queue, and that crash, since it was just a fender bender in a parking lot, went from a fatality to not even affecting their score.
How long did it take you to get a response to be able to claim victory on that data queue?
Excellent question. Within a week. Now, when you do data queues for it is not an FMCSA reportable crash, or it's not the type of crash that they showed on the crash report, those data queues go to the state. They don't go to FMCSA. Now, let's say it is an FMCSA reportable crash. Then you have to go through the crash preventability determination program eligibility guide. If it's listed in there, then we can do a data queue through that system. Same data queue system, just different tiles that you click on, but those crashes go to FMCSA, and everybody knows that FMCSA is really fast on responding to people. Just kidding. It's taking
I was
three
gonna,
three plus months. It's taken 3+
Yeah.
months. Better to have it a non-reportable crash and get it taken care of within a week, and it comes completely off of your CSA profile. And then in the second scenario, the crash preventability determination program, it's going to sit there for a minimum of 3 months on our profile. And then if it does get ruled as non-preventable, then it stays on the CSA profile, but the point value does not affect your CSA profile. So there's two listings when you look at your SMS profile. It'll say prevent crashes and then non-preventable crashes. It'll be listed in there. So
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I thought you were going to say something, Tom. Just know that all data queues, when you do a data queue for a crash, you have to have a copy of the police accident report. It can't be a form exchanging information and insurance information. It has to be the actual official police accident report. It's called the PAR. In addition to that, if it is a fatal crash, we also have to provide drug and alcohol testing reports. We got to upload that. If you don't have the report for whatever reason, let's say the driver was one of the persons that was injured during the crash, right? We'll have to get those drug and alcohol testing reports possibly from the hospital. Or let's say our driver was incarcerated for whatever reason, and the for whatever reason, we don't know what it's for. It could be because there is a warrant from something else had nothing to do with the crash, and we didn't have access to the driver. Well, after the first 2 hours, we got to do alcohol testing, or we got to write a form up stating the reason why we couldn't do it. After 8 hours of not being able to do an alcohol test, we have to write up another form stating why that couldn't occur. And I believe without looking at the regulation, I think it's 32 or 34 hours for the drug test. If we can't do that test within that time, we have to write up a form stating why that couldn't be done. If you don't have that information, your data queue will be denied for the crash preventability determination program. Because remember, all fatalities are reportable crashes, no matter what.
As a reminder to the audience, we welcome some questions here. I've got a couple that I'm thinking about here. So, obviously, you stress very well, guys, that crashes have nothing to do with inspections, whereas the other six did. And I just saw someone raise their hand with a question. So, thank you. We'll get to you in just a second. But this is one of those things. I can't help but think about the importance of a pre-trip inspection because if something's vulnerable that might lead to a breakdown on the road that could lead to a crash, maybe it gets caught. I was talking to a driver recently, and it was not exactly the wisest statement I've ever heard, but he basically said, I do a really good pre-trip inspection on Sunday. I do a kind of a half-ass one middle of the week, and then I start with a really strong one again on Sunday. Now, is that the approach you would recommend?
I would not recommend that. A thorough inspection every day you're driving is what I would recommend.
Yeah, I recommend that as well, including inter-trip inspections focusing on lights and tires. because you never know when a light goes out, and you never know when you're going to pick up some sort of debris to flatten out a tire as well. And what I mean by inter-trip inspections, you don't have to make extra stops. Every time you stop to use the bathroom, get something to eat, fuel up, just walk around, check the lights, make sure that they're operational, and check and thump every tire. Make sure it still has air in it.
Absolutely. What do you say to folks? I mean, we know that even a lot of larger, financially strong motor carriers are now stretching out their trade cycles to where they may have gotten rid of it, a tractor around 4 years, 450,000 miles. Now, I've talked to many, public and private, who never would have dreamt that they're going to be out to 600 to 650,000 miles. It seems to me that that would be more important than ever, both on the preventative maintenance front as well as these pre-trip inspections. What are you guys advising folks to at least try to off control what you can control, I guess is what I'm asking.
I would say focus on, I mean, the driver could control and could report to the mechanics, which is basically tires is a big thing. Also, brakes out of adjustment. If you're going to be driving long haul, like those are key important things that I believe cause a lot of accidents. And those two violations that I just said carries the most points for your vehicle maintenance at the end of the day.
Yeah. So realistically, when it comes to vehicle maintenance, um, do more than the annual inspection, require, biannual or quarterly inspections, and use a reputable mechanic to either do your repairs or do those annual inspections. Literally done level one inspections on vehicle that had an annual inspection the day before and found vehicle maintenance violations, equipment violations on the truck. I mean, they were missing stuff. And that's because these mechanics, they don't know what exactly is required on every little thing when it comes to trucks, when it comes to the regulations. They know how to keep them running, but little nuanced things they may not necessarily be aware of, especially when there are things that come down the pipe that when the laws change. But the number one indicator for crashes, without a doubt, is hours of service and unsafe driving violations,
Hmm.
without a doubt.
Here's a question from Samantha. How do we protect ourselves from accidents instigated by four-wheelers? And it sounds like there's a story or two behind that question.
Cameras facing outwards from your vehicle. If you can get them all around your vehicle, then you can see down the sides and in the rear of the vehicle. Cameras tell a great story, right? And then let's say we don't have cameras, or even if we do, and we do get into a crash, if we can do so safely, take pictures of all the vehicles involved. You want all four sides, front, back, left, right. You want the entire view of the vehicle in the camera or in the view in that picture when you take them, and all four corners of that way. Let's say somebody hit us on the right side, it's their passenger side, and they come back and say, yeah, well, we had damage also on our driver's side and on the front. Well, I got pictures showing that there's no damage there at all because we took them already. Everybody has cameras on their phones right now. So if you can get front, back, left, right, and all four corners, that's a great start. And another thing it will do for you is it will tell us whether or not it's disabling damage if we get pictures of all of that, possibly being able to remove it from your CSA profile.
We've got another question here from Beirut. I want to acknowledge it, but I want to ask one question before I forget about it. Different perspectives on data queues. Some motor carriers wait and save them and think, well, I'll try to address them as I get to, 90 to 100 days from my insurance renewal. Others may think about doing it throughout the year if they sense that it's winnable. Do you guys have a advice on what strategy? Should you wait and just save them all and hope that you get lucky before the insurance renewal, or should you conduct a data queue more in real time while everything's fresh, and then it's not so rushed at the end ahead of a renewal?
I would say if it's accidents, I mean, we could submit those right away. If it's hours of service, vehicle maintenance, unsafe driving, I'd wait a little bit before submitting them. You wouldn't want to submit them like the next day or the next week. You could wait a little bit, especially if you have all the evidence.
Mark, any different thoughts?
When it comes to crashes, you look at it and you data queue them as they come in. If you have not had a program where you have reviewed them, or you even think that you have a really good program, you come partner with Reliance partners. We've had several of our clients say, "Hey, we're doing a pretty good job." And you say, "Hey, you know what? Let's get another set of eyes on it." And I go through them. I have literally helped out more than one carrier, large ones, um, finding either non-reportable or crashes that fit within the crash preventability determination program and successfully data queued them for our clients, bringing them from the alert to out of the alert. It's huge. And once we do that, and the way that we do our data queues, the motor carrier gets a copy of every thing, response, data queue that's submitted, and then the determination that's made. And then they can download the information that we write up on a form from the data queue system. So they see how we're data queuing this, and then they can emulate that themselves moving forward. So they'll have a really robust system in place when things do go wrong.
I hope I'm not butchering this person's name, Birute, but the question is, our fleet's most common citations in the last 6 months have been tire-related out-of-service violations, especially low inflation, under 50%, and tread depth below 230 seconds. What proactive systems do you recommend fleets implement to catch these issues earlier?
Well,
Uh,
go ahead, Mark.
All right. So this is a two different issues that we're talking about here.
Yep.
We have no idea when a tire becomes deflated and for what reason. There are automatic tire inflation systems that are available. Those automated tire inflation systems will keep your tires aired up to the normal operating pressures, right? When the seasons change, you go from 100-degree weather down in Arizona, Daniel, and you come up to Wisconsin when we're supposed to have -6 on Saturday. The tire pressure in those tires is going to go down, right? So that automated tire inflation system will help with that. If we get a pinhole from somewhere or there's some other leak somewhere for whatever reason, it's a violation if an inspector can detect it, but it's not out of service if the automatic tire inflation system can keep up with the pressure loss. So, and then on top of it, that system notifies the driver when they have a tire maintenance issue. Now, let's say we get a violation for less than 2/32 inch tread. One comes down to training our drivers on what to look for when it comes to tire tread depth. It's any major groove less than 2/32 inches around the entire circumference of the tire. Now, you have to inspect your tires multiple times because you can't look at the bottom of a tire when it's stopped. So eventually you're going to see all around the tire, and you should normally see when that happens. Now, those are for non-steer axle tires. For steer axle tires, we need 4/32 inch tread in every major groove around the entire circumference of the tire for steer tires. Very important. Where those are normally going to wear out is going to be the inside groove and the outside groove. They wear out faster than the middle grooves. You get multiple tires less than 2/32 inches, you discipline the driver and you discipline the driver severely, and you advertise it to all your other drivers. You don't have to tell who it was. All you can say is one of our drivers got a less than 2/32 inch on three different tires. We gave him a week off before we gave him another load. We cannot afford to have these types of violations because literally those are 8-point violations for every one that you get. And if it's out of service, add another two. And then with the time waiting, you multiply it by three. So 8 times 3 is 24 points for one tire at 2/32 inch tread.
those inter inspections that Mark discussed a bit ago are very important, especially if you know if you're coming up to a scale that that you pass through frequently. Why don't you? I would recommend finding a Lowe's, a Pilot, maybe 5, 10 minutes away, and do a inter inspection. Check your tires, check your lights before you approach that scale. That way, if you do get pulled in, you already know you checked your equipment the best you could. It goes a long way.
It really does. And the more that you stay on your drivers, we had a system in place for one of our clients up here in Wisconsin where we actually inspected um, the vehicle in in the middle of their driving because they drove through the same areas all the time. It was right next to a scale. So we had everybody come in. We looked over their vehicles. The first time that we did that, we had a bunch of issues that we discovered. After 3 months, we couldn't, we had a very, very difficult time finding any violations on any of the vehicles. And we're just doing walkarounds. We're doing lights and tires, things of that nature. So, another thing to keep in mind is a lot of scale facilities now have tire pressure sensing systems in the roadway, and they can, either entering a scale or even the middle of nowhere. I know Wisconsin has some on before some bridges, um, and as long as an inspector just logs into a website, he can watch as the trucks go across. It'll flag vehicles that are overweight. It'll flag vehicles that they say have low tire pressure. And then a minute later, there comes the vehicle rolling down the road right next to them. And they just pull out and stop them. So they get indicators before you even stop that you have flat tires. So the best way to handle it is check them early, check them often.
Well, and to we're not going to endorse any one company, but I know I've played golf with a couple people from PSI, Pressure Systems International, over the years. That's a leading player in this space. I believe you've got two companies that sound similar, but they're different. Hall Dex with a D, and then Hall Tech, Branick, Branick, BKT. And then I can't remember if Caterpillar has a presence in monitoring PSI as well, but those would be certainly some vendors that you might want to look at that can help keep those not only monitor them, but I think they have automatic inflation capabilities built into some of those systems. So keep that in mind. But when you get into tread depth, I mean that just boils down to either a need for a retread or a new tire. But yeah, that's a trickier one.
Yeah, definitely. Drivers can get those the low 2/32 inch tread. They can find that on pre-trip, post-trips. Now, the only time it would be more difficult is if they had to slam on their brakes for a second and they didn't have a load in their trailer and they skid flatted that trailer, right? So they get one spot on the tire that's less than 2/32 inch tread.
Yeah.
So, but if you get it around the entire circumference, you got 8 inches of it somewhere, then their drivers have not been taking care of it or notifying those who need to be notified to get their tires taken care of when they do find it.
All right, we're getting down to the last few minutes here. So again, if the audience has questions, feel free to use either the chat icon at the bottom or the Q&A icon. Let's go back to, so there has been a crash. There's an accident. You talked a little bit about the importance of taking pictures with the driver's cell phone. What about with the driver? What should he or she say to a victim? Let's say it's a victim in a passenger car. Should they avoid that person altogether? Should they stay in their truck until the officer's there and then take pictures? There's a lot of nuances there to make the most of time. What are your guys' pieces of advice around some of those challenges?
You don't want to touch somebody that's injured. I mean, you're gonna go check on them, but if they're in a bad state, you don't really want to move them or possibly hurt them anymore. But try the best you can to assist in any possible way. Um, and then what Mark said, taking pictures is really important because once an officer gets on scene, most likely they're not going to want you near the scene because they're going to start investigating.
Take pictures right away. Yeah.
So
Um,
I've done some training on this when it comes to when I used to work with law enforcement, and I would go and talk to motor carriers. The first thing the driver needs to do once they're in a crash, they got to make sure that they're okay, right? Once you get in a crash, your adrenaline starts going. You could be severely injured and not even know it. There was a not involving a CMV, but there was a crash with a guardrail and a minivan where the guardrail had impaled this person in the car. And the guy was talking to me, and he's like, "Hey, can you help me out?" And I looked at the back. I'm like, you just stay right there. He didn't feel it. He was in shock. So first,
mm,
evaluate yourself. Make sure that you're okay. Second thing you do is evaluate the area around you. Is it safe to get out of the vehicle? Okay. And then if it is safe to get out of the vehicle, because you come up in the north and people are sliding around all over the place when it starts snowing, you don't want to get hit by another vehicle. Your best place to stay is inside your vehicle. After that, check on other parties. You know, call law enforcement. If you can move your vehicle from the roadway and out of danger's way, you can do that as well.
Daniel, you mentioned not moving or really even touching someone. Is something as courteous as providing a blanket? Is that okay?
I would say yes, and usually when an accident happens, you're gonna have somebody in the medical field that's gonna stop right away. It happens probably 95% of the time. I'm a nurse, I'm an EMT with somebody else. Somebody's gonna stop and they're gonna take over because they have that training to assist that driver or passenger of the other vehicle.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well, especially in urban areas.
Yeah. I
So,
know folks sometimes get frustrated with cameras. They think that that will lead to an automatic reduction in insurance premiums. And I think, our advice is more it's what it could prevent in terms of big damages down the road in the event that one of your trucks gets in an accident and you've got accurate footage of the car whipping in front of you or whatever it may have been. So you may not save initially on the premium, but in terms of claims and some sort of a legal award and all that, it can save buku dollars. So I would view it more in that context than just pure premiums.
yeah. One thing I really do want to touch on, I know we're getting towards the end, is um, during an audit, FMCSA they're the ones that generate your score. They know when a motor carrier is going to fail the crash basic without looking at anything more than the numbers that are shown on the MCS 150 and how many reported crashes that are on their SMS profile. And failing the accident factor, which is having 1.5 crashes per million miles or higher, you automatically go conditional in your rating as a motor carrier when if you get audited during that time. Now, the auditor is supposed to look at the crashes and not use crashes that were non-preventable. Um, so there's a little leeway there, but if we can get those things taken care of prior to an audit, that's best. And remember, our CSA scores is for FMCSA to identify carriers who have the propensity to get into crashes by having high scores in all the different basics. Well, this basic actually is recording all the crashes, right? So best to, um, go through your crashes, make sure that none of them are um, non-reportable to FMCSA, and we can do those data queues. And if they are, then see if we can do a data queue through the crash preventability determination program. And if you need assistance with that, you can contact Daniel or myself, and we can talk to you about how we can help you out.
Yeah, you
This
see there.
year,
Go
this
ahead.
year they actually added more scenarios or examples to that crash preventability, and one of them is dash cameras. So
Yes.
it's that's been really helpful. We've submitted quite a few with dash cameras already. Evidence.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the queue. What I would remind the audience of is Our next session will be January 15th at 3 p.m. Eastern. We will have that out on the socials next week with the sign up link. And of course, feel free to reach out to your Reliance representative. If you're not a Reliance customer, we'd love to just have a conversation with you. You see Mark and Daniel's contact information there. As a reminder, beyond that, the calendar that we showed earlier, we now have dates in February, February 12th and March 19th. We did not have those previously. We will also be making these slides available early next week through Audra, who helps us behind the scenes. And so, with that, I want to thank everyone for today's participation. Mark and Daniel, thanks so much for your insights on crashes. There's so much to do. And I want to wish everyone who joined us today a fantastic holiday season. So, with that, I bid everyone adieu and thank you for that last kind message.
Take care,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Take care. Bye.